We spent the early part of the show today talking about the city's new master urban plan. Valerie Plante yesterday, along with some other city officials. I'm basically giving us an idea of this gigantic dreamscape, if I can call it that, because I think more than anything, it's a dream because there was no dollars attached to this. We don't know how much it's going to cost. We know what some of it might cost. So it involved the metro lines, extension of a couple of them. It involved rescaling or reintroducing, I guess, the pink line on a scaled-back version, and a whole lot more, including a tramway. To me, this is what kind of stands out for a couple of reasons. Number one, I know obviously it's expensive, right? When you deal with an extension of a metro line, we're talking about millions, oftentimes billions of dollars. You figured a tram might be a little less expensive, but it turns out the numbers we saw, the breakdown, shows that tram, that's part of this master urban plan, would come in somewhere north of $90 billion. So we want to find out a little bit more. It's one thing for the city to say, here's what we're thinking the city will look like or should look like in 2050. It's another to say, is this realistic from a fiscal point of view? Richard Shearmur is an urban planning professor at McGill University. He is on the line. Richard, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Let's get to it. Let me start off by, first of all, overall, when you've seen the details now of this plan, what was your initial reaction?
Well, my initial reaction was that it's a very ambitious plan. It sets out a vision for what the administration would like the city to become. But then the big question is it possible to actually get there? And I think that's where the rubber hits the road, really.
So if we're talking about gets there, I bring up the tram for a couple of different reasons. Number one, this is something that's been talked about in Montreal, I think, for at least 15 or 20 years. It's never come to fruition. Now the city wants to make this a key part of this urban plan because it would travel roughly 180 kilometers across the city from east to west. But Richard, I saw the first breakdown of the numbers here, and the analysis is, and maybe you could sort of weigh in on this, at about $500 million per kilometer. This proposal itself, just for the tram, would come in basically north of $90 billion. That's a B, $90 billion. So how likely, first of all, how accurate is that, do you think?
I mean, it's very difficult for me to comment. I mean, these things are difficult to cost out, but it sounds as if it's in the right sort of ballpark. I'm not surprised by that sort of number. Then the next question is, how realistic is it to come about? I think this is aspirational, so I doubt it will actually come about as it's planned. On the other hand, really this is part of a bigger sort of vision and understanding that really we've got to, or the city is trying to get people out of their cars into public transport, onto their bikes and things like that for environmental reasons. I mean, there are good reasons to do that. And I think that their reasoning is we have to provide alternatives for people to get around. So the tram is the sort of alternative they're thinking of. But if they are going to go down that route, they're going to have to find some money. And we're seeing now, even in Quebec, where there's this proposal which, with a new bridge and trams, comes to sort of $15 billion. And the big question is, who's going to pay for that? You know, is it going to be the province? Is it going to be the federal government? Is it going to be Montreal? Right now, this is a nice plan, and I can see why they have it there. But I can't see really where that money is going to come from. Certainly not, the city can't raise it. The city raises its money from property taxes, and that's not a very efficient way of raising money for any of this.
And I believe Montreal raises more of its revenue as a percentage from residential taxes than any other city in the country. I remember reading that not that long ago. I would ask, by the way, with respect to this tram, I think all of us would agree, even as motorists, that if we can convince people to take public transit as opposed to taking their car, clearly that's a good idea. But my problem with this, as I've seen it now, is they also point out in this master plan, and you can call this the downside of a tramway, top speed for this is 30 kilometers an hour. That's top speed. How are you getting from one? I mean, it would seem to me in 2024, when we have become so accustomed to getting everywhere quick, doing everything quick, right? It's always about making something faster. You're going to take this mode of transportation and basically make it slower than you would actually be able to go in a car. That's the part I don't understand.
Yeah, I can see that. On the other hand, the average speed of cars in and around the city is not particularly fast. I know that the top speed is faster, but when you have to stop at traffic lights, there's all the orange cones, there's the school buses, so it does slow things down. So if they can actually get a tram moving consistently at 30 kilometers an hour, and they have sort of priority along the roads that they're going on, it won't actually be much slower than a car, really, I don't think. The question is, will it be caught up in the sort of congestion that cars are caught up in? And will they have to stop at traffic lights, or will the lights sort of change green automatically? There are ways to make a 30 kilometers an hour top speed actually fairly rapid to get around the town, just because of how slow it is actually to drive our cars to most places within a city.
Okay, I mean, that's fair. You're right. It's not exactly a cakewalk to be driving through the city, but I think we probably still do better than 30 kilometers an hour. I would ask you, as an urban planner, Montreal oftentimes refers to situations in other cities, typically European cities. Are trams becoming a bigger solution to public transit in cities from what you've seen?
Yes, in Europe, trams, particularly in continental Europe, not so much in Europe, in England, but across France and Germany, and which I know relatively well, there are many trams and many new tramways are being set out, and they have really. But it's part of a wider transformation of these cities, where a lot of the city centres are now essentially pedestrianised, and people get there on the trams, and the trams sort of will go out toward the suburbs, and if necessary, you can then park your car at a sort of car park out of town, hop on a tram, and get downtown. So it's really been a rethinking of European cities, which has really been going on for the last 30 or 40 years. And it's partly, these cities are built differently. They are more compact. The roads are narrow, so it was always more difficult to get around in cars. And partly the transformation has been going on for a long time. It didn't just happen overnight.
And is it being accepted? Is it working in these cities?
On the whole, it is working, yes. I think that there is a different tradition. I mean, there's a far wider acceptance of public transport in most European cities, and this is a cultural or historic thing. People have been more used to even taking the train between cities. I mean, cities are a lot closer. So it's far more integrated into the way of thinking of people living in these cities. So although the trams have really been rolled out, the new trams have really been rolled out over the last 20 or 25 years, and the thinking happened before, but they've been rolled out over the last 20 or 25 years, there's a lot more, what we would call social acceptability of trams, whereas here we are in North America, where basically cities have been built up and organized around the car. So it's far more of a transformation, not only of the cities themselves, but of our way of thinking about cities here in North America than it has been in Europe.
So do you think then, is it simply a matter of saying, okay, it works there, there's no reason we can't make it here, or work the same way here, despite the fact that, as you mentioned, densification, very much different there than it is here? Is it workable?
I think it can't work in the same way. I think whether we like it or not, we have to accept that the minute that we get out of the core of downtown or the central districts of Montreal, there's very little alternative to using the car. So I think here far more thought has to be given as to how we can integrate both. And also recognize that we do need to provide some alternatives for people who, say, are coming from out of town, who are living in the more distant suburbs, which are never really going to be very effectively served by public transport. So I think there's a far more effort that's got to go into what I would say is called retrofitting our North American cities if we're going to sort of make them look like European cities. I would say, though, the reason for doing that is the wider question of the environmental crisis that we're facing. So the reason there's so much effort being put to try and provide an alternative to cars, and the tramway is one of them, is because of the wider sort of climate crisis which we're being faced. And so cities are trying to find ways to address it. And they don't have 101 ways of doing it. So this is one suggestion or one vision that Montreal has put forward.
Just as a final question, you mentioned a few minutes ago, when we talked about some of these towns in Europe, about pedestrianizing, say, the downtowns. Do you sense that that's what's coming next? I know they're changing some of the rules in old Montreal. Can you see that actually happening downtown, per se?
I mean, there's certainly a debate right now about that. I can't see it happening across the whole of downtown. I can see a move, as we see temporarily, in summer, of more streets becoming pedestrianized or being pedestrianized more often. I'm thinking of Mount Royal, of Vernon Street. So I do see a move towards that, but not the pedestrianization of the whole of downtown.
What about this idea of a congestion tax?
Well, it hasn't worked yet in New York, has it?
Not so far.
I think we're some way off that.
All right. Mr. Shearmur, I thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Very much appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Richard Shearmur, he is a professor at McGill in urban planning.